Hey everyone, I'm Jacob with the Leaderboard, and I know that we're on a gaming channel right now, but bear with me for a second because something's been on my mind lately. So, the third Cloverfield movie came out last month, and I just watched it, and it was alright, I guess. But regardless of the quality of the movie, the sudden release reignited discussion about how the Cloverfield series is structured and marketed, which is unlike any other major franchise out there. So why am I going on about this? Well, this is Assassin's Creed, and as you've astutely observed, it is not Cloverfield. But here's the thing, maybe it should be. So obviously we're doing things a little different today. Bear in mind that pretty much everything I'm about to say is an opinion, but it's to incite a discussion. We're just here to have a conversation. So put away your hidden blade, pull up a chair, and relax by the hearth for a fireside chat. I'm just kidding, I don't own a fireplace. So what do I mean when I say that Assassin's Creed should be like Cloverfield? I don't mean that the games should have our sneak boy heroes fighting aliens or suddenly being a sci-fi series, more than it already is, but I mean that there's potential in the shared ideas of both of these franchises. All of the movies or games in the Cloverfield or Assassin's Creed series are relatively individual experiences that are tangentially related through an overhanging plot thread whose presence is always felt. Whether it's the dread of the Cloverfield verse or the concept of the Animus allowing us to relive past lives from virtually any point in history. But while both of these series seem thematically sound, there's a major difference between the two, which is how they handle subsequent releases. Cloverfield has, for better or worse, had every film be a completely different genre, from a found footage horror film to a tense claustrophobic thriller to more traditional sci-fi horror. And to be fair, there's no shortage of series that pivot in similar ways, like the comedic shift between Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2, the sci-fi horror Alien to the more action-focused Aliens, and I mean, just look at all of the different Batman movies. But I've gone with the Cloverfield example for reasons, just hear me out, it's all gonna make sense later. Assassin's Creed, regardless of which flavor of robe you're going for, is most likely gonna be a pretty similar experience no matter what you play, but what if Assassin's Creed did the same thing as what this series of movies does? Maintain the same general themes while taking more risks mechanically throughout each game. Now let me be clear and say that I don't think Assassin's Creed is a bad series or that any of the entries I've played have been wholly unpleasant experiences, but I don't think it's unfair to say that some people have felt the series has gotten a little stale over the years, which was pretty disappointing to see considering the direction the series could have gone in. I know hindsight is 20/20, but Assassin's Creed to me symbolizes a missed opportunity. What Ubisoft wrote with Assassin's Creed was a blank check to get experimental with the mechanics of this historical fiction anthology and have it all live under the Assassin's Creed banner. And yeah, there are spin-off games, but I'm talking about the main series. I love our boys. Ezio, Connor, Altair, Bayek, Edward, Michael Fassbender, but consider the options you'd have if the games had significantly varied focuses than the formulaic experiences of what the games became. Out of curiosity, I made a small poll asking people what their favorite Assassin's Creed game was, and as expected, I didn't get a big enough sample size, but the early trends showed that the favorites were Assassin's Creed 2 and Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, a sentiment reflected in most online lists you'll see that rank the series. And I'd argue that those two games represent the biggest deviations from the Assassin's Creed formula. Let me start with 2 because that one's harder to explain, mostly because it's the game that actually laid out the groundwork for what most of the other games would become.
It's a me!
Let's go!
But in context, Assassin's Creed 2 was new and exciting. It's no secret that the first game in the series was originally meant as a spiritual sequel to Prince of Persia, which incidentally was the best series of its generation.
Fight me.
It ended up with generally positive reviews, but existed more as a proof of concept than anything else. And while the historical fiction, atmosphere, and focus on stealth were great, it was criticized heavily due to its samey tasks, non-evolving gameplay, and an unnecessarily long time spent traveling, among other things. Assassin's Creed 2, on the other hand, improved on just about everything that the first game struggled with, providing players with the feeling of a fresh new experience. This was no longer a slog of a stealth game, this was an adventure. It was an entire life, and it was the start of something incredible. And the prospect of a new hero in a new setting that allows for drastically different gameplay was exciting, so what happened next? The games continued to just sort of wallow in this Renaissance, post-Renaissance world with the same types of buildings for easy climbing and little differentiating each game mechanically. By the time even Revelations was released, people started to decry the series for being samey, and those fears weren't quelled with Assassin's Creed 3, which despite changing the location and hero again, still began to feel a little too similar to our time with Ezio. Though there was one thing about 3 that people took note of. Those ship sailing mechanics were pretty great. I wonder if they're planning on using those in a future game.
Yeah!
Woo! And they did. Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag turned out to be the breath of fresh air that the series needed, and by a strange coincidence, it's also the Assassin's Creed that has the least to do with assassins or creeds. And even when assassins did show up, Edward was usually like, oh Christ, not these f***ers again. It's a great Assassin's Creed because in many ways, it's an Assassin's Creed in name only. Much of it was a subversion of everything the series had become up to that point. You want to be climbing around huge metropolis? Too bad, you're stuck in the middle of the ocean. Want to uphold the assassin order? Nope, you just stole an actual assassin's pants and now you're being harassed by them. You want to try to be stealthy? Here are some broadside cannons. Good luck. That said, Black Flag did possess a lot of what you would expect from an Assassin's Creed game, but to a lot of people, the parts that made it Assassin's Creed weren't the main focus. The main focus was that Black Flag was one of the best pirate games you could get your hands on, and it still is. But after Black Flag, the series more or less went back to what it did before, venturing back to Europe to focus on vistas that were similar to what was explored in the Ezio era, but slightly more modernized, whether it was the time of the French Revolution or the relatively more modern Victorian era, but for some reason, these games weren't able to recapture minds. I mean, yeah, Unity was a glitchy mess at launch that likely made people more wary of buying Assassin's Creed games, but there's definitely something to be said for fatigue for the yearly release schedule as well. Syndicate was one of the worst selling of the series before Ubisoft took a break to take their time with Origins, which sort of met halfway between what Black Flag did and what the rest of the series did, revamping aspects like combat but still feeling very much like an Assassin's Creed game. But this is the thing, Assassin's Creed has always found itself in a losing battle against itself when it comes to innovation, and the series' greatest successes have come from when the team has chosen to refocus or completely change the core appeal of the game. So why not continue this trend but get weird with it? Why not try Assassin's Creed as completely different genres? Why not try Assassin's Creed as something like a Cold War spy thriller where the majority of the game is being held together by uncertain tension, like that scene in Inglourious Basterds? You know the one I'm talking about. Now, obviously, this would raise some issues. First of all, some people might be apprehensive of having various games in the series having vastly different mechanics, but it seems like every time Assassin's Creed has done it, it's ended with the games being critically praised, and it wouldn't be the first time a series has completely changed their mechanics for the sake of experimentation. So why not apply that logic to trim some of the fat from that well-known Ubisoft formula and refocus to create one seamless, immersive experience, regardless of how much it would feel like an Assassin's Creed game? After all, shoehorning in mechanics for the sake of consistency in a franchise doesn't guarantee praise. I mean, just look at the criticisms of BioShock Infinite as an example of that. It's okay, Infinite, I still love you, even if others pretend not to. Next, it would likely cost $1 billion to refocus every game, and studios generally aren't willing to put tons of money into big risks, especially when it comes to big franchises, right? But if the series followed the Cloverfield model, there would be the option of optioning games by other studios to be assimilated into the Assassin's Creed franchise. Take some other game or concept that shows promise that might not sell as well as its own product, give it some of that Doki Doki Panic sparkle, and you got a brand spanking new Assassin's Creed game just ready to go. But if you did this, then what kinds of games would be acceptable? How flexible can a game series be with its genres before they're just relegated to the mobile devices and pachinko machines of the world? Would the brand not be cheapened by renting it out to other studios? The more that I think about this idea, this sounds a lot like what Games Workshop has done with the Warhammer license. Sub-licensing everything and letting studios of all types experiment with what can be done with their established IP, and only backing those that are more likely to succeed. And it's worked so far for Games Workshop and its incredibly deep and varied Warhammer license. And Bad Robot's Borg-like strategy of assimilating other works into the lore of Cloverfield seems to be working for them as well. Well, so far at least. Both 10 Cloverfield Lane and the Cloverfield Paradox were completely independent projects, originally called The Cellar and God Particle respectively, before being given the opportunity to slap that Cloverfield Mystery Meat branding onto their titles. And while it's arguable that the Cloverfield connections actually improved either movie, okay, no, it's not. The shoehorn references in both of them are pretty clumsy, but this strategy shouldn't be condemned for taking bold risks like that, and that definitely doesn't mean it could never work. I'm willing to bet that 10 Cloverfield Lane wouldn't be half as successful that it turned out to be if it didn't have that name attached to it, which would have been a shame because it's excellent. Assassin's Creed's framing device gives it a brilliant opportunity to follow both of these business models if it wanted to. After all, it doesn't have too much of a lore to focus on anyway, since most of it involves fictionalizing aspects of our own world. And again, it already kind of does this with things like its Chronicle series and their existing handheld and mobile games. So why not give other larger studios more freedom in experimenting with what makes a game an Assassin's Creed game when the time comes to add another main installment to the series? I don't pretend to know the solutions to these problems that I just made up. I'm not a game designer or a businessman or anything like that. I'm just a video editor and a fan of video games. But when I think of the name Assassin's Creed, I don't immediately think of some dude in robes running around various major cities like an absolute lunatic. I don't even think of an age-old war between assassins and Templars. I imagine a secret world run by one secret organization that pulls the strings of the world without anyone knowing. I don't automatically assume that the assassins are the good guys in any story that plays out. I think about every possible way you could interpret the word assassin, and there are a million ways you could go about that. What about an Assassin's Creed set in feudal Japan? Make it a full-blown samurai or ninja game. Flex those stealth muscles. What about a game that takes place in the modern day that was equal part political thriller and something reminiscent of Hitman? Or what about a game that challenges what it means to be an assassin in the video game realm? One that slowly and gradually builds to just one assassination. The assassination. The one that sets the events of World War I into action. As I look back on Assassin's Creed, I rarely look back on the individual games. Some of them I barely remember at all, but what I see in Assassin's Creed is an idea. A great idea. And that idea is the Animus serving as a portal to a vast anthology, a breadth of new and distinct journeys. The excuse for every game being a wildly different experience is written into the DNA of the series. If each game significantly deviated for their mechanics or the studios developing them, would they all be masterpieces? I doubt it. There would absolutely be some failures, but when they did fail, they would be able to fail in new and interesting ways. But what do y'all think? Do you think that there was a missed opportunity with the Assassin's Creed franchise, or do you love all of the games for what they are? Let us know your thoughts in the comments about this, because everyone I've heard has a different take with this series. And also, definitely let us know if you liked this different type of video by either clicking that like button or letting us know with your words. And if you want to hear more unsolicited musings about games and movies and whatever the hell's on my mind at that moment, feel free to check me out on my personal channel, which is called Sandwichy, because I'm terrible at branding myself. And of course, before we part ways today, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the Leaderboard, your home for video game facts, and also opinions, because that's what this video is.